my name is Kevin Cook, Product Training Manager for the Equinox louvered roof system. Today I'm going to review with you how to program the linear smart motors. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that you should use 14-2 landscape wiring to connect all the components together, and we recommend programming everything in a shop setting before you install it. It is an easier operation. To wire a 29 amp transformer, you first want to make sure the red switch on the side is set to 115. You then want to power and wire in the input. If you use our pigtail, we use international wiring colors. The brown will go to the load or positive, the blue will go to the negative, and the green will go to the ground. If everything is wired correctly, when it's plugged in, the green light will become illuminated. To wire all of our outputs, we recommend using 14-2 landscape wiring. You'll notice there's 6 connectors, 3 negative and 3 positive. You want to make sure you're wiring in the corresponding positive and negative. In this case, we use the positive on the left and the negative on the left. To wire our 50 amp transformer, you first want to check the red switch to make sure it's set to 115. You then want to take the pigtail that we sell that uses international wiring colors and wire the brown into the positive or the load, then the blue into the negative, and the green into the ground. If everything's wired correctly, you'll hear the fan running and you'll also see the green light illuminated. To wire the output that goes to the receiver, we have 6 connectors back here. The 3 on the left are negative, the 3 on the right are positive. You want to wire in the corresponding connectors. In this case, we did the negative on the left and the positive on the left. You have to make sure these match to wire correctly. So to wire a RTS receiver, there's 2 steps. You first want to wire in the motors. When you receive the RTS box, you'll see a set of 6 connectors right here and 6 connectors right here. It's going to come with this little block that has the 6 pins connectors on it. You can easily break this off into sets of 2. You only need to worry about the far connectors on each side to wire in the motor. You'll wire this block to your motor wires and plug it in. In this case, we're using 2 motors. So we're going to wire 1 into the S1 and 1 into the S2. After you wire the motors, you'll connect your power input to the center power connector right here. When connecting the power, there is a positive and negative marked on the connector. It is very important to ensure correct polarity. For the polarity with the motors, it is not as important. It is universal. It just changes the direction, which we'll talk about in programming. If everything is wired correctly, you'll see a blinking S light here that'll blink green about every 5 seconds. One other thing on the RTS receiver is there's a set of 5 white toggle switches. We're only worried about switch number 3 and number 4. You want number 3 on, which ensures you have proper amperage coming to the receiver. Number 4 controls the internal temperature sensor. When the temperature drops below 37 degrees, the sensor will automatically open the position you set during the programming. In our case, we're going to turn that off and not worry about that temperature sensor. So once your receiver is wired with your motors coming in and your power coming in, you're now ready for programming. To program it, you first want to reset the receiver. To do that, you press and hold the black programming button for about 10 seconds. It's going to go through different light cycles, including all the lights coming on, or what I call the Christmas tree. Once that happens, you can release it. The green S light will be blinking again. You now know you're ready for programming. To get in programming mode, you press and hold that same programming button for about 3 seconds. You'll see the S1 and S2 amber lights blink. As soon as that does, you can release it. S1 light will stay on, and motor 1 will jog. You now know you're in motor 1 programming. To program the motor, you take the remote, and you want to make sure you have the corresponding channel selected on the remote. In this case, for motor 1, we want channel 1, so we're going to go through the LED lights till only channel 1 is blinking. We need the remote to recognize the motor. We're going to press and hold the up and down button briefly. Motor 1 will jog. We now know we're in motor 1 programming on the remote. You then need to check the direction. In this case, when we install it according to the instructions, the actuator will extend to open the pergola or retract to close it. We're going to press the up button to make sure it extends. You can see it's not. We need to reverse the motor direction. You will press and hold the My button for about 3 seconds. Motor 1 will jog. If you press the up button again, it will now extend. We have the correct direction set in. We now need the motor to learn its limits. To do that, you briefly press the up and down button. the actuator is going to fully retract or close the system, and then it's going to fully extend or open the system. It is important during this step you don't press any buttons because you don't want to interfere with the movement. This is also why we recommend programming the motors not attached to the pergola in a shop setting like this, because if there's anything mechanical causing the levers not to operate correctly and the motor not to fully extend, it will not program correctly. Once the motor is fully extended and it stops, you then want to retract it. We talked about earlier about the temperature setting on switch 4. Even though we turn that off, we still need to program a freeze setting into our motor. What that does is if this switch was on, it would open the pergola to that freeze setting you program in to keep the levers from freezing. So in this case, once it's fully retracted or closed, I will then extend the motor by holding the up button for about 3 seconds, so it just extends about 1 inch, so I know that my levers would open 1 inch in that setting. I want to lock in that temperature setting by pressing and holding the My button for about 3 seconds. The motor will jog. Then to lock in the programming on the remote, you flip it over, briefly press the button on the back, the motor jogs again, your amber light turns off on S1, and you know you're now programmed motor 1. If you have additional motors, in this case we have motor 2 connected to S2, you need to program that S2 setting. First thing you want to do is make sure your remote is on the corresponding channel, S2. We're going to briefly press and hold that program button again for about 3 seconds. Your amber lights are going to flash. First S1 will come in, press it again to get over to S2, and motor 2 will jog. We're now in motor 2 programming, and you go through the same steps on the remote to program motor 2. So once you have programmed your motors to your receiver, in this case we have 2 motors programmed to a receiver, you can program both motors to work on the same channel. You'll see here motor 1 works on channel 1 independently, and motor 2 works on channel 2 independently. To get both of these working on the same channel, you first want to go to channel 1, motor 1. You press and hold the button on the back of the remote till motor 1 jogs. You now are going to clone channel 1 to our all channel, or channel 5. So switch over to channel 5 on the remote, briefly press the button on the back, the motor will jog, and motor 1 is now operating cloned to channel 5. Do the same thing for additional motors. In this case, we're going to go to channel 2. We're going to press and hold the button on the back of the remote. Motor 2 is going to jog. We're now going to switch to channel 5 on our remote. We're going to clone channel 2, motor 2 to channel 5 by briefly pressing the button on the back. The motor will jog, and you'll see when I have channel 5 selected, both motors will simultaneously operate. It's the same concept if you need to program an additional remote. On the first remote, you will go to channel 1. You briefly press the button on the back. Motor 1 will jog. You go to your additional remote, select channel 1, briefly press the button on the back. You have now cloned motor 1 to the new channel 1 on the remote. If you want to clone channel 2, you go to your old remote, select channel 2, press and hold the button on the back for about 3 seconds. Motor 2 is going to jog. Go to your new remote, select channel 2, press the button on the back, motor 2 will jog. You now have 2 remotes that operate exactly the same. If you want to add the Somfy wall switch or any other additional Somfy accessories, it's the same programming steps. You do not need to use the box to program additional remotes or controllers. Thanks for joining us today. We hope this video helps you with your Equinox installation. If you need additional assistance or have technical questions, please email our tech team.